Hello, and thank you for joining us at the Mountain View Writing Center. This is Luke, and today I'm going to be talking to you about argumentative models. When we think about argumentative models, the first considerations are the audience, the subject, and the purpose. The audience is who we're going to be talking to. The subject is what we're going to be talking about, and the purpose is why we're talking about that subject to that audience. The three models we're going to be talking about today are the classical model, the Toulmin model, and the Rogerian model. Let's take the classical model first. The classical model sees its audience as a middle group. They might be uninformed, they might be ignorant of the subject, but they might also be well-informed. We can cover pretty much any subject, controversial or not, in the classical model, but usually we're going to be making an argument about a controversial subject. Our purpose here is often to inform, but more often to convince. There are 5 parts of the classical model: the introduction, the thesis, the proof, the refutation, and the conclusion. The classical introduction needs to be attention-grabbing. For many professors, this means you need a story and/or an anecdote, something that presents the topic at hand in a relatable story. It's okay to make the story up or to use a hypothetical example. You might also use personal experience if you have some. Retell the history or a current event that makes the issue relevant to the audience. Give a description of the situation, or simply provide an explanation for why you're about to argue something. The classical thesis is always the main claim of your paper, also known as a proposition. At the end of the introduction is usually where you would find a thesis. Generally, it's going to be 1 sentence, no more than 2 for most classical arguments. The proof is going to be your hard evidence to support your claim. These include things like studies, expert testimonies, historical documents, established facts, etc. Don't forget to provide a clear connection from your proof to your claim by way of explanation or analysis. The refutation is when you respectfully anticipate and address other opposing viewpoints. You want to make sure to concede irrefutable points, that is, points that your opponent has that are true, but also expose the weakness of their other points. So, if they are correct about their facts, but their interpretation of the facts is wrong, you would want to make sure to expose that in the refutation. Always make sure before you leave the refutation section to restate the superiority of your thesis. Remember, when you're refuting, you need to be explaining not only what they get right, but how they are also wrong, and you are right. In the conclusion, you need to creatively rephrase your thesis. Don't just restate it word for word. What this means is, in light of all the evidence you've provided, restate your major claim. You might also, in certain types of assignments, give more story, one that concludes the one you began in the introduction, or that presents the moral of the paper. Remember that although you will have emotional appeals throughout the paper, you might conclude on one because people often make decisions based on emotions. Finish strong. Your last sentence of your conclusion should be something that bolsters your point and leaves the audience with a strong impression. Let's move on to the Toulmin model. For the Toulmin model, the audience is generally an in-group. The subject for the Toulmin model would be one of particular interest to your audience. That is, since you are talking to an in-group, This is something in which everyone is interested. The purpose would be to gain consensus or to convince them of your interpretation of that subject. The parts of the Toulmin model are going to be the claim, the warrant, and the grounds. Within these, we want to make sure that our claim has appropriate qualifiers, that our warrants, if necessary, have backing, and that our grounds are tempered with concessions and refutations. We'll get into all of these in the next slides. The Toulmin claim is going to be a proposition, thesis, or opinion. It may be more than a couple of sentences, but it still needs to be as clear and precise as possible. To that end, we use what we call qualifiers, which are limitations on our claim. Instead of making universal claims like everyone does this or all people are this, we need to say things like many people or most people or some people, and use words like probably, possibly. These words let our audience know that we don't think our claim fits all people or all situations. It shows that we have thoroughly thought out the ramifications of what we're arguing. The warrant is an inference, belief, assumption, or accepted value that your audience holds true. Hopefully, you also share this with your audience, and therefore can use it to great rhetorical effect in your argument. The warrant's primary function is to link the claim to its grounds. If your audience does not hold the warrant as strongly as you do, or they don't quite understand what warrant you're getting at, you may need to provide backing. You only necessarily need to back warrants your audience is not likely to already accept. For instance, if I was to make an argument that something that was happening imposed on our freedom, I wouldn't need to argue to most Americans that freedom is something we need to protect. The Toulmin grounds are going to be the evidence or data that back up what you're saying. We may have emotional or value appeals mixed into these, or we may read our evidence or data through specific emotions or values. It's also important to concede points to our opposition here, but also refute opposing interpretations, much like in the classical model. For a Toulmin paper, we want to end on our claim and our key grounds. We will remind the people where our argument is coming from. For our third and final model, we'll be talking about the Rogerian. This is a somewhat different structure because we're not actually attempting to win. The Rogerian model is for groups that are definitely out-groups. The subjects are controversial, and the people may have very distinct opinions on how the subject should be interpreted. The purpose of the Rogerian model is to build consensus and promote understanding, not to win. Our best possible end is a reasonable compromise that both sides can agree to. The parts of the Rogerian model include the history, explanations of the positions, concessions and common ground, concern or compromise, the support, and the conclusion. The Rogerian history is going to be the background and context of the conflict, the different sides taken, and the results of those sides being taken, also known as the fruits of disagreement. If we continue with our fruit metaphor, the possible fruits of compromise or a solution are how we would conclude our history section. So, what has happened? Why is everyone so upset? And then we start negotiating. In a Rogerian argument, the primary and most important step are the explanations. The very first thing you should do after describing the history in general is fully describe the opposition in a way that they accept. If they don't accept the way you describe their position, you need to start over and try to describe it in terms that are more fair. Next, you describe your position in light of the common ground you share with the opposition. remember that you're not making a claim against them, and at this point, you're not intending to refute anything that they've said. Always be clear in your explanations and include a lot of details. One of the things you want to avoid is miscommunication or misunderstanding. Next, we want to highlight in an even more overt way the common ground, the things both positions have in common. This is an attempt to build a basis for compromise. At this point, we also want to concede ways that the opposing viewpoint is better. We might also consider, since we're building a compromise, conceding things that are less important. Remember, we can always come back and have a new conversation about those things, but whatever crisis we're responding to now requires the major things get taken care of. Next, we want to present a compromise solution that takes both positions into account. Remember, this is primarily based on concern for the situation, not on a desire to win. We want to make sure that it is as equitable as possible, since we're hoping that our hostile audience actually agrees to it. After presenting the compromise, we need to explain how the compromise will benefit both sides. Always select your content based on the audience. That is, are they more likely to respond to emotional appeals, to appeals to reasonableness, or some hard evidence that demonstrates the benefits? Likely it will be some mix of all three. In the conclusion, we want to summarize the important points. Remember to note how your solution addresses the challenges of the present situation. Because if it doesn't do that, it's not a very good compromise. And make sure to highlight the benefits of the compromise, admit the remaining issues, and be sincere. There are always going to be further things to work out, but is this a compromise that both sides can agree to settle whatever dispute is at hand? Thank you for watching this presentation on argumentative models. If you have any further questions about argumentative models, or about writing in general, feel free to come see us at the Academic Center for Writing in W114.